Welcome back, everyone. We're going to continue on with the story of the Abbasids now. So we had talked about the Umayyads in the last lecture. And so we're just going to continue on with this two important dynasties. As I mentioned last time, you need to know for both of them how they came about, how they came to power, what happened, what accomplishments they had. They were in power, and what happened to them. And we left off last time we had just about finished the Umayyads. We didn't talk about what happened to them, and what's going to happen to them is this new group known as the Abbasids are going to essentially take over the same region. So here's just our map that we could use to kind of talk about the Umayyad expansion, just as a quick review from last time. You can see kind of the extent here. It says of Umayyad control all the way from the Middle East through the area of Iraq we talked about, Arabia, obviously. I remember I mentioned they went through North Africa, and they got all the way into Spain. And so the Umayyads conquered a lot of territory under their various rulers, which we had discussed in the last lecture. Question is, what happens to them? And the question is how do the Abbasids take over? Well, it's not very complicated. So let's go to our kind of key words here and talk about exactly how the Abbasids replaced the Umayyads for control. So the last Umayyad ruler is this man named Marwan al-Khamar. And I don't know if anybody speaks any Arabic who's watching this, but I speak Hebrew fluently. I only know a few words in Arabic. But Marwan al-Khamar, right around these years, around 740 AD, 740s AD, he is the last of the leaders of the Umayyad. And his name, Marwan al-Khamar, is basically means the jackass, and not exactly the best nickname. And why is he called that? Well, he's described as not being reliable, irrational, all these things, and he's a weak ruler. And he runs into this next guy named Abu al-Abbas. And Abu al-Abbas, he is going to lead the Abbasids. He comes in these years, 747 to 750. His nickname is the Bloodletter. So you got one guy named Jackass, the other guy's named the Bloodletter. And so you can imagine which one's going to win this conflict, and the Abbasids take over. His symbol was a black flag, and they moved into the areas of Umayyad control and assert power, basically, from the Umayyads. One of the things right away is they move their power center from Damascus. If you remember, Damascus was the area where the Umayyads had their major center, to modern day Iraq, and specifically the city of Kufa. As you can see, there's one of the key words. And so this is where you're going to get the shift from the Umayyads to the Abbasids. Now, in terms of what the Abbasids accomplish, it's not going to be about conquering a lot of land. Honestly, there isn't much more land for the Abbasids to take over in the area. The Umayyads had already accomplished that. So the question is, what do the Abbasids do that's important to this history? And even though they don't conquer a tremendous amount of territory, they are going to be the ones who control most of the Middle East. One area that they're not going to control is Spain. In fact, one of the things the Abbasids did is they hunted down pretty much all the Umayyad leadership and killed them. Very, very Machiavellian, if you know that story of Machiavelli. So they killed them. Basically, the only areas where the Umayyads maintained any sort of strength was this area, kind of see on the map here in this light blue near Spain. Other than that, all the other areas, the Umayyads were basically wiped out. So the Abbasids are in control. They're, again, not going to conquer a lot of territory, but they are going to have other achievements. One of which is creating a beautiful city, this very famous city in the Middle East, the city of Baghdad. And Baghdad, it becomes really one of the most remarkable cities in the entire history of the region, anywhere in the world at this time. Later on, we're going to talk about some of the achievements in science and math, and Baghdad was kind of one of the centers of known information and knowledge in the world at the time. So it starts a lot by a man named Al-Mansur around the mid-700s. He's the one who, he's an Abbasid ruler who begins to build up the city of Baghdad. The city is sometimes called Madinat al-Salam, so basically that translates to city of peace. And they really build it up. There's a great account I found of what Baghdad is like under Abbasid rulership. I'm just going to read to you a small paragraph from it. This is a couple hundred years later. This is around the year 1000 AD when the Abbasids are still in control. But it's a great example of how the Abbasids took this city and just made it really remarkable. So let me just read you and I'll kind of show you why it's so remarkable as we go through it. Says the city of Baghdad formed two vast semicircles on the right and left banks of the Tigris, 12 miles in diameter. The numerous suburbs covered with parks, gardens, villas, and beautiful promenades, and plentifully supplied with rich bazaars and finely built mosques and baths, stretched on for considerable distances on both sides of the river. In the days of its prosperity, the population of Baghdad and its suburbs amounted to over 2 million. Again, you have to remember this is during the Middle Ages in the West. Maybe an average sized city in the West at this time is 30, 40,000. And here you have people with 2 million in Baghdad. The palace of the caliph stood in the midst of a vast park several hours in circumference, which besides a menagerie comprised an enclosure for wild animals reserved for the chase. The palace grounds were laid out with gardens and adorned with exquisite taste with plants, flowers, and trees, reservoirs and fountains surrounded by sculptured figures on the side of the river. Sculptured figures. On this side of the river stood the palace of the great nobles. Immense streets, none less than 40 cubits wide, traversed the city from one end to another, dividing into blocks or quarters, each under the control of an overseer or supervisor who looked after the cleanliness, sanitation, and comfort of the inhabitants. It goes on. It's a much longer source, but you get the idea. This is a really amazing city at the time. That was around the year 1000 AD when that source was written. And so this is where it begins. Another important man named Al-Rashid. He's another Abbasid ruler who also elevates Baghdad dramatically. There were stories that there was so much wealth in Baghdad at the time that Al-Rashid would give like 60,000 dinars, which is a lot of money, to somebody who would come in and give a good song. There's stories of plates that were made of gold and silver and tapestries that were lined with gems. This is when you also get the stories of the kind of the Arabian Nights tales all during this time. So this is definitely one of the big achievements of the Abbasids that I want you to know about is they did have tremendous architecture and building up cities, and Baghdad is the best example of that. So while they don't conquer a lot of land, they're clearly, a very advanced society. We're going to see this in other ways as well. So one of the most significant achievements we have of the Abbasids is in the areas of science. And there's quite a few people. I'm not going to give you all of them. There's a little bit more in your textbook on this as well. But definitely these names I'm giving you, you definitely want to know. And we'll start with this man named Jabir ibn Hayyan. There's a picture of him here that you see around 800 AD. He's from modern day Iraq, and he is known as the father of chemistry. And again, don't just get down these names. As always, you're getting the names. Everything I say about them, the details are important. So he's the father of chemistry. He develops experimentation, which is pretty dramatic considering the time period. 800 AD, if you think of like the scientific revolution in Western civilization, that's what, 1600s AD until they even start developing things like that. So very advanced, 700 years ahead of what was going on in the West. He develops techniques to slow down rust. He develops techniques of studying various acids and how they could be used on metals and glass and all these kind of different things, dissolving gold. Alchemy, I guess you could say, is a good word for what he does. And so, again, father of chemistry, pretty cool things that he does. A lot of advancements in medicine for the time period. There's three individuals I want you to know, all three of them. The first two, Al-Razi and Ibn Sina, are both from Baghdad. We'll start with Al-Razi. He is a medical doctor around the year 900 AD. He was actually the chief of the Baghdad hospital. And he was also kind of part of this group of traveling physicians that they had that would literally go, to home visits. Traveling physicians would go people they were sick and they would treat them. He treated all sorts of things like bladder stones and kidney stones. He studied diseases like smallpox and measles. Obviously, he's not coming up with any cures for those things, but just the fact that he had studied them is really remarkable for that time in history. He had written a lot of documents. I think he wrote something like 56 different papers on medicine and entire medical encyclopedia that he wrote. And so, very advanced again, Al-Razi for his time period, considering we're in 900 AD. And just to give you perspective, when you talk about medicine and Western civilization at this time, they were basically drilling holes in people's heads and trying to figure out why people were crazy by drilling holes in their heads. So much more advanced than what you saw in the West during these years. All right, so that's one. Second guy I want you to know about is Ibn Sina. He's also from Iraq. So still another one of these kind of achievements of the Abbasid period. Specifically, again, Ibn Sina is from Baghdad, and his big achievement is writing a book called Al-Kanunum, which is basically a document that listed 700 various drugs and how they would be used to help and treat various illnesses. So good, again, very advanced to understand medicine and how it goes through your body and so forth. I'm going to try, hopefully I'll find the right link in the video that will work, is a good video that kind of captures some of this, that talks about, just the advancements in science and medicine that they had. So if I can find that link for you, I'll put it in the module as well. And you'll want to watch if I can find it, of course. So anyways, Ibn Sina does that, very, very advanced in that sense. Ibn Sina, just a little side note, was also kind of a jack of all trades. He wrote about meteorology, he wrote about earthquakes, so he had a lot of different things there. Last guy here is a man named Abu al-Qasim, and Abu al-Qasim was actually from Spain, but still, did very advanced things around a little bit later. He's around year 1000 AD, about 900, 1000 AD, and he did surgeries for bladder stones. He cauterized wounds to stop infections. But I think one of the most impressive things about Abu al-Qasim is he did human dissections of human bodies, autopsies, which again, to give you perspective, you didn't have autopsies allowed, for example, in England until 1832. People were doing them before 1832, but they were doing them illegally. And here it's all very approved, and people said, hey, we got to study the human body and how it works. So he was doing human dissections as around the year, again, 900 to 1000 AD. So Abu al-Qasim, very impressive in that sense. So anyways, those are a few guys. Again, there's some other people in your textbook, but you could definitely want to know the chemist, Jabir ibn Hayyan, and these three medical guys. All right, let's move on. Math. All right. So for mathematics, one of the things we get is this image you have here. And we use this every day. This is one of the most important contributions we get from the Abbasid period. And it's numerals, Arabic numerals, the numbers we use. So check this out. So these are numbers we have over the different civilizations, Egyptians, Babylonians. You probably don't recognize these. I'm assuming most of you recognize Roman numbers, and then Arabic numbers. And you go, okay, what's the big deal? I mean, think of how much more math you could do with Arabic number than with Roman numbers. I mean, try to do multiplication, for example, with Roman numerals. How do you, what's the Roman numeral? It's just, I don't know, let's take a number 24, right? And you want to multiply that by, I don't know, 15. Okay, how do you do that with Roman numerals? You don't, right? It's just not something that's doable. And so the mathematics that we're able to achieve through Arabic numerals around the year 800, 900 AD is pretty tremendous. And so this is something we all use today. It's a global thing we all use, and it's one of the great achievements of the Abbasid period. So you want to know that. There's a lot of dispute about the number 0. I mean, there's no dispute that Arabic numerals come from the Middle East. There's some people say, oh yeah, the Middle East also developed the number 0. There are people in India say, no, we did first. People in China said, well, we did first. But the Arabic numerals are obviously the Arabic numerals. So that's one big achievement. And then you have this other guy. I'm going to show you a picture of him in a second. Muhammad bin Musa al-Kulsan. He's actually from Uzbekistan. And he's a mathematician who comes up with all these algorithms. And in these algorithms, he puts them all together in a book called Al-Jabal. Well, you can probably figure out what these algorithms are from his book. Guys, this is the beginning of algebra. And so if you don't like algebra, you can blame him. And so this is, again, one of the big achievements from the Abbasid period. So both in science, in math, in medicine, you see a lot of things here. Here's actually a picture of him that I found this on a stamp. And if you look at it, you can probably see somebody recognized this, had a former student from Russia, and he says, wait a second, this is Soviet. And it is because he's from Uzbekistan, and at one point, Uzbekistan, of course, going to be under Soviet influence. And so the stamp has this man, Muhammad bin Musa al-Kulsan, who, of course, develops algebra. So, you can thank him for that. All right, next. Some other advancements that I'm not going to go into a lot of detail. Again, there's more in your textbook, but I want you to know about this. Astronomy, this is something that you start to see during this time period developing in the Middle East in the Abbasid period. A man named Al-Masudi talks about evolution. Now, when we think of evolution, we usually think of Darwin, and that's what, 1800s AD. Now, to be fair, there were ancient Greeks who thought about this as well, and they just didn't develop it as well. So maybe the people in the Middle East weren't the very first to come up with it, but the fact that they're talking about concepts of evolution, I think is impressive. One of the most important things that you get under the Abbasid period is paper making. And you go, why is paper making important? Well, without paper making, it's a lot harder to get information out, and it helps. Paper mills are created, and you can write things, and you can create massive libraries, and you have a lot of that in the Middle East because of paper making. And I found this other interesting source. A man named Al-Jaziri wrote a book called The Book of Knowledge of Ingenious Mechanical Devices. And basically, it's kind of an early crude form of a steam engine. And so, these are type of things that they kind of come up with during the Middle East and the Abbasid period. So I think all of this is important because it shows their advancements. So, as I started in this video, yes, the Abbasids don't take over a lot of land, but Baghdad and the science and the medicine and all these things that they achieve is still pretty important. I want you to know about them. All right, so I hope all that's clear. I know a lot of new names here, I'm sure, to you guys. So you want to make sure you're getting all the notes, and always use the spellings you see on the key words, not the closed caption, because sometimes the closed caption isn't going to do all these words correctly. All right, and so what happens to the Abbasids? So this is a pretty dramatic civilization. They control a lot of area. And what happens to the Abbasids is actually not too complicated. What happens is they're very large. And as they become very large, it's very hard for one person sitting in Baghdad to administrate this massive area. And so what they decide to do, this is around about a little bit before the year 1000 AD, is create these quote unquote tax farm areas where instead of having everything centralized, there were areas that would be tax farm areas that people there would collect the taxes, and then the money was supposed to go back to the Abbasid leaders. Well, that's not going to happen. What happens in these tax farm areas is individuals are going to take those taxes and they're just going to use the money for themselves in that area, and it's not going to kind of gravitate back to the central authority. And as a result of that, while technically the Abbasids are going to be around for a while, technically the Abbasids are going to go on for a couple hundred more years, realistically, by the time we get to about the year 1000 AD, they're very decentralized. There's no strong central authority, and the Abbasid leadership becomes weak. And that opens everything up to what I have here called the Age of Invasion. And so up to now, when we talked about the rise of the Islamic period, the classical Islamic period, remember, the Islamic faith has been dominant, they've been growing, they've been expanding, and this has become a pretty strong piece of real estate now under Abbasid rule. Well, as we move to about the year 1000 AD, in fact, between about 1000, just to put it down for you, to about 1300 AD, this entire area that is now decentralized because of the Abbasids' kind of tax farm situation is going to be invaded. And there are going to be three major invasions into this area that are going to end the centralized control and then, more importantly, open up this whole area for a new Middle Eastern power to take over, the most important of all the Middle Eastern powers to take over. And so, what we have to do is get to that point. And the first thing to do is talk about these various invasions, talk about the different groups that basically collapse the. Excuse me. Uh, Needed to sneeze. Sorry. Need to collapse that do collapse the Abbasid officially, and then what happens after this age of invasion? The vacuum that it creates, which opens the door for the new civilization that will be the dominant force in the Middle East for a long time. All right, so I hope that's clear. We're going to go on in this age of invasion in the next lectures. And if you have any questions, please let me know. Thank you.